Our military is capable if we end the start and stop approach of stopping to negotiate and then starting up a military campaign. We need to allow our military to do what they do best and then negotiate from the rubble.
Well, it's increasingly looking like Republican Congressman Michael McCaul is going to get what he wants, essentially pulverizing Iran and then negotiating from the rubble, because the Pentagon is apparently moving additional military assets and they're conducting a troop surge in the Middle East to, I guess, escalate the war against Iran. And troops on the ground, boots on the ground, not out of the question. We have no idea what Trump is thinking or what he's ultimately going to decide to do. Where is he going to land on this? But it is very expensive to send all these military assets to the Middle East and just keep them there for no reason. So I would venture to say that he is looking to escalate. So according to US officials who spoke to the Wall Street Journal, squadrons of jet fighters have been staged across the Middle East, and bomber aircraft at bases in the US and UK are on high alert to ramp up operations. So what has been transpiring over the past week? If you've been paying attention to the movement of military assets, then you're probably on top of this already. And it does signal that this war is about to escalate. So in the past week, special operations forces have deployed to the region from their US bases, and that's according to flight tracking data and the US officials who spoke to the Wall Street Journal. Squadrons of jet fighters have been staged across the Middle East, and bomber aircraft at bases in the US and UK are on high alert, again, to ramp up operations, according to one of the officials. Ramp up operations. There is an official tied to the White House who spoke to the Wall Street Journal and specifically said, we're going to ramp up operations. But here's the problem. Ramping up operations doesn't accomplish anything because there really isn't a military option to end this war. If there were a military option, President Donald Trump would have already deployed that military option. And if you're under the impression that pulverizing Iran will bring the IRGC to its knees, I think you're sadly mistaken. All you have to do is witness a little bit of modern history and how the Iraq-Iran war of the 1980s played out. The Iranians do not give up, and they are willing to take a lot of pain to survive. And it turns out that they're actually very strategic in how they're carrying out this war. Also, I should note that the movement of military assets from various bases, US, UK, to the Middle East include F-16 jet fighters from an airbase in Germany. And then there's also F-35s that are being moved from an airbase in England to the Middle East. Also, and this is really important, more than 150 medics have arrived at the Landstuhl Regional Medical Center in Germany in recent days. The hospital is the primary location for treating troops injured in combat in the Middle East as they fight a war on behalf of a foreign country, Israel. So they are anticipating more casualties, more US casualties in this disastrous war. So the preparations do indicate that Trump is considering escalation with possible boots on the ground as well, although we don't really have much clarity or confirmation on it. I just want to give you all the details we have at the moment. And Abbas Araghchi, who's the Iranian foreign minister, did respond to some of Trump's threats. He said in a social media post that any aggression against Iran, including our infrastructure, which Trump repeatedly said that he's going to target, will compel a powerful and decisive response. The troop surge and military buildup could also be about fighting the Houthi rebels in Yemen, who have effectively blocked the Red Sea. So the transit of Saudi oil is essentially blocked. It's over for now. Saudi Arabia was getting around the Hormuz Strait blockade by using, a route that needs passage through the Red Sea, but the Houthis have now blocked it. So I think this is all obviously disastrous for the global economy. But what I'm prioritizing for the purposes of this discussion is literal human lives. Not only is this war already expensive, not only do we find ourselves in a quagmire, not only have we already lost 18 service members, Trump is sending 150 medics to the region in anticipation of more casualties on our side. So the Houthis, by the way, lashed out against Saudi Arabia last week. They accused Saudi Arabia of bombing an airstrip to prevent an Iranian plane from landing at one of their airports, the Sana'a airport. And the real question here is, if the surge in troops and military assets is about defeating the Houthis, well, is Trump going to be able to do that? And that's not a facetious question. I'm asking a genuine question because recent history proves that beating the Houthis was a lot more difficult than Trump expected, and he just quit. He just gave up at some point. So Trump launched an airstrike campaign against the Houthis last year. It ended after 2 months with a simple ceasefire. There was no deal. There was no bargaining, nothing. It's like, all right, we're done. These guys are serious, and it's over. So after that, Houthis, they were battered by, the U.S. strikes against them, but they obviously survived, and then they are now able to carry out this blockade in the Red Sea. So I don't know if there's really a military option in defeating the Houthis. How do you defeat an idea? Especially an idea that springs from the atrocities that are being committed in the Middle East right now. That's what perpetuates the type of ideology that, the West purports to be so concerned about. So the war has proven to be costly for the United States as well. So yesterday, the Republican-controlled House passed a bill. I thought it was $73 billion for supplemental military and intelligence funding, but no, it was close to $100 billion. I just want to remind you that Pete Hegseth in the Defense Department asked for a supplemental funding bill to the tune of, what was it, 67? Yeah, $67 billion. Congress like, we got you, bro. We're going to give you close to 100 billion. Anyway, neocon Mark Thiessen, who by any rational description is a failure of a man. Okay, if you don't believe me, he was one of George W. Bush's speechwriters. He was the top speechwriter for Rumsfeld. And his political predictions, as you can imagine, have consistently been wrong. He was a huge promoter of the Iraq War. Of course he was. And that reality of him constantly being wrong doesn't stop Fox News from booking him to give his expert opinion on what Trump should do next when it comes to the war against Iran. Take a look.
Devil's advocate and some of these Democratic senators saying we don't know the plan to end. Like, how do we end this? And they're saying they haven't laid out or heard a specific strategy.
I can give it to you right now.
Go ahead.
It's very simple.
Which is why I asked.
Okay, so we stop the fighting and the ceasefire on the 20-yard line. We take it into the end zone. We do we have about 14 days of combat where we have to take out all the targets that we have available. We take out we took out 85% of their defense industrial base. We take out 95% of it. We set back all their programs and we further entomb the nuclear dust. Then we stop major combat operations. We impose the blockade. We open up Cargill. We open up the Strait of Hormuz. And then we go and we help the Iranian people overthrow their regime the same way that the United States, we have muscle memory doing this. We liberated 400 million people during the Cold War without boots on the ground. We armed the Contras. We armed the Mujahideen. We armed UNITA Angola. We helped Solidarity. We helped Charter 77 in Czech Republic. We know how to bring down regimes without boots on the ground.
Mark Thiessen is one of the most ghoulish, disgusting people in our media today. Did he just promote the fact that we armed the Contras? Do you guys remember how that happened? Do you remember the flood of crack cocaine in South LA by the CIA in order to raise the money to provide the arms for the Contras? Oh, but who cares? That's just a Black community in Los Angeles that has struggled ever since, right? He's not a military expert. He's never served in the military. He has no idea what he's talking about. The only thing he knows without a shadow of a doubt is that he loves Israel and will expend any resource, any human life here in the United States on behalf of his little war, on behalf of his little country that he thinks is so important that it destroyed our country already. So why don't we actually hear from military experts, people who know what they're talking about? Because if there were a military option, Trump would have deployed it by now. We bombed the crap out of Iran for 40 days, and we came out of it with depleted munitions, And investigative reporting indicates that Iran still has upward of 70% of their munitions intact. Now, if you could snap your fingers and build a bunch of missiles in a day or so, maybe Mark Thiessen might have an argument, but that's not the case. It takes literally years to build these missiles and interceptors. Years. So, Mark, what do we do? What do we do after we run out and we're engaged in a war with a country that has a ton of missiles? What do we do? Freaking moron. Anyway, I told myself I'd be calm. Anyway, so if Trump wants to put boots on the ground, if he wants to see a surge of troops, like the Iraq war surge that was carried out, would that be successful? Do we even have enough troops? I don't know. Why don't we actually hear from people who know what they're talking about? This is Colonel Douglas McGregor on the Daniel Davis deep dive from this morning.
What would happen if President Trump today was tempted to say, if an invasion happens, to say, I'm going to do my own Desert Storm and I'm going to move a bunch of troops over there? Can we do that?
No, first of all, we live in a new world today, and you could never build a lodgment unless you had enormous quantities of air and missile defense that you could surround the so-called lodgment area where you would collect and organize and assemble forces. And at the time, one of the things that we discussed privately was if we ever have to come back again in the future, given the direction of technology, we'd probably have to land at a place like Yenbu on the Red Sea and then cross the desert. Because if we tried to get into the Persian Gulf, we would be sunk or attacked or killed pretty rapidly. A lot of people realized, I think more people realized the danger that would be presented in the future than we appreciate right now.
I mean, is Mark Thiessen at all aware of the terrain in Iran, the geography and the challenges that Iran's geography poses to our soldiers? Does he care at all? No, of course not. Because there's really no cost to him in taking that risk, right? There's only upside for the Mark Thiessens of the world. He's not worried about losing his life. His kids aren't in the military. I don't even know if he has kids. He's not worried about lives lost. So let's try it. Let's try it and see what happens. What's the worst that could happen? We just spend a lot of money and get a bunch of soldiers killed? Is that what it is? We don't even have the amount of troops necessary to do a surge like that. Now, look, to be fair, Mark Thiessen's like, you don't necessarily have to put boots on the ground. Let's just bomb the crap out of Iran and bring them to their knees. That doesn't work. We've tried it. And the only way to maybe possibly succeed in regime change would be boots on the ground. But with Iran, it's actually a lot more challenging because they have a decentralized governing system, which is why the decapitation strikes that were carried out against Iran didn't work. It's not as simple as like, oh, let's just assassinate a bunch of their, top politicians or political leaders and we'll call it a day. They're mullahs. No, it's actually a lot more complicated than that. But, Thiessen's a buffoon. One more video for you, because we aren't just limited in regard to the number of troops. We're limited in many ways. We are not prepared for this war that Trump stupidly trusted the Israelis in carrying out because they told him it'd be easy. Obviously, it's not easy. It's been a disaster so far. So here is Colonel Daniel Davis and Douglas McGregor talking about our limitations.
President Trump keeps saying, and Secretary Hicks said 2 days ago, repeated, we're the most powerful military on the planet. And yet we couldn't even do a Desert Storm 2 because of our limited capability. That's the reality of it.
Yeah, I think we have to understand that it's civilians in general, particularly people who are members of Congress, they're very impressed with glitz and glamour, shock and awe. You show them videotapes of explosions. They equate an explosion on the ground with an effect that is a war-winning effect. There's no understanding of how complex warfare is, and the need for multiple capabilities being employed and orchestrated as an integrated force. There's just no understanding of that at all. So everybody is in the hunt for a silver bullet. Everybody wants to buy the silver bullet that will win the war. And we're finding out that there are no silver bullets unless you want to go the nuclear route. And we should talk about that because I think that's being discussed too.
I do think that's being discussed, and I'm worried about it. I'm worried that the country that has a clandestine nuclear program and consistently threatens to use those nukes happens to be the country that convinced Trump to engage in this war because Iran can't have nukes, which they didn't have, and there was no indication they were actually building. I actually kind of wish they did build nukes because that would have served as a deterrent, and maybe Trump would have thought twice before attacking them and destroying the global economy with a quagmire war that we don't see an end for. How does this end? The only way this could end is if Trump takes his ball and goes home. I know that's a hard thing to hear. I know he doesn't like to think of himself as a loser. He's in government right now. He's the president of the United States right now. And he's still crying like a little bitch over 2020. We're in a lot of trouble. I don't know how this ends. And I'm terrified that nuclear bombs will be used. I'm terrified that more innocent people, including our service members, are going to get killed. And obviously, I'm worried about the devastating destruction that's happening to the world economy, our global economy. Because even if the war ended today, guys, things don't just go back to normal immediately. You don't just snap your fingers and, the shut down oil refineries start working again. No, like a lot goes into it, and a lot of damage has been done to oil and gas infrastructure in the Gulf and in Russia, which, it's a different war, but.
Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows.